Yo, what's going on, everybody? It is 1 p.m. here in Crystal Lake, Illinois. That means it's time for another live stream. Today is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. It is a lovely day, a cold day here. So, everyone that's listening in the podcast, in the audio only version, hopefully you are having a warm run or at least staying warm on your run. I ran in the snow today in a park. And for most of my run today, I was doing like loops, and there was another guy on like cross country skis, and he was doing loops in the opposite direction, and we saw each other like 6 or 7 times. And each time I think that guy was like, "This guy's still running," and I was like, "This guy's still skiing." So it was pretty funny. We kind of just kept giving each other funny looks. So hopefully, if you are in the snow, you're having weird, funny interactions with cross country skiers too. And everyone watching this on YouTube, not live, but later in the day, hopefully dinner cleanup is going well and you're kicking back and relaxing. All right, let's see who we got in the chat. We've got Energy Runner here. It says, "Hi, Kofuzi." And it says, "Hi, Kofuzi, everybody." And Martha's here with a nice wave emoji. Good to see you guys. All right, I'm going to scroll down in the chat, make sure I'm catching up with everyone. But also, I want to hurry up and introduce, because she's sitting here waiting, the planted runner, Claire Bartholic. She is someone that you guys probably know if you guys are podcast junkies. It's a voice that her voice is one that I'm like very familiar with because I've just been listening to the podcast for a little while. And then I recently had a chance to talk to her a little while ago, and we brought her in for our happy hours, bringing in friends every Thursday. So here she is. Without further ado, Claire, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. How is the weather? You're in Asheville. So how's the weather down there?
I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, and it is gray and rainy as I look out my window. So
Okay.
thank God it's not snow, but
You
it's
guys,
rain.
you guys do get snow occasionally though, there,
We
right?
do. We
Mhm.
do. We're at about 2,200 feet. So I'm
Mhm.
in the mountains.
Mhm.
But so the statistic is 13 inches a year, but we
Oh,
usually
okay.
get that all at once and then it melts.
Oh, okay.
But a little bit of snow. But I'm originally from Glen Ellen, Illinois. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
know all about
All right.
Chicagoland weather.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. Now, because I knew you weren't originally from Asheville, that you moved there at some point. I just couldn't remember where originally that you're from. I
Hmm.
had no idea that it's pretty close to over here in Crystal Lake, out in the far suburbs where I am.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
long have you been in
I
Nashville?
I've been in Nashville since 2001. So I've been in the South longer than I've been a Yankee. So,
Okay. Mhm. Mhm.
so I'm more Southern than Northern at this point.
Okay. Yeah. So I am originally from New Jersey, but I've been living in the Midwest. I lived in St. Louis and then now in the Chicago and Chicagoland area since like 2001. So I feel like
Hmm.
that's about like 50-50 at this point. So I'm like,
Yeah,
can I
exactly.
really call myself an East Coaster anymore? I don't think so. I don't think so.
you're,
I,
you're used to the Central Time Zone now. You just can't go back.
yeah, that's definitely true. All right, we got something in the chat for you here. Energy Runner. I used that thumbnail that you have, or that photo that
Oh,
you have, that shows all of your different marathon progressions for the thumbnail
yeah.
for today's live stream. And Energy Runner says, "Your progression on the thumbnail looks insane. I hope to progress the same way." And that's an
Hmm.
amazing progression. Can you tell us, like, go over for people who haven't seen the thumbnail or who are listening, like, what was the progression? And what I want to know is, how long did that take for you?
So it took 9 marathons. So that was
Mhm.
about 4.5 years. I did two a year for the most part, spring and fall. And yeah, my first marathon was a 4:02, totally respectable. And then my ninth marathon, I did have a DNF. I don't know if that one counts. But besides that one, my last marathon was 2:58, but my second to last marathon was 3 hours and 39 seconds. So
Oh,
I
okay. Yeah,
definitely had a redemption,
yeah.
run, and I had to get that 2, it's all
Mhm,
about
mhm.
the sub 3. It's not about the 3 flat. You got to get the sub.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I ran 2:58 last June for the first time. But the marathon before that was in LA, and it was 3 hours and like 43 seconds. So I know the feeling very, very well
Yeah,
of
it
like being
stings.
so close.
It stings, but everybody still cheers you on, They're
Mhm.
like, "Well, you did it. You got 3 hours." And I'm like, but I gotta go back again.
Yeah,
I
you're
gotta
like,
do
"I
it
should have been
again.
more specific. I wanted sub 3 hour, not a
Yes,
3 hour, marathon."
exactly. You gotta visualize the number you want.
Exactly, 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 that's so funny. Can you tell us, like, what were as you were, like, getting closer, because 'cause you're chopping off big bunches of time, and
Mhm,
as you're getting closer, like, the second to last one was not quite to the sub 3.
mhm.
Like, as you're getting closer, what are some of the last few things that you kind of added or changed, if anything, that got you kind of, like, past that hump?
Yeah, surprisingly, what really made it click is I actually had to take away what I was doing.
Mhm, mhm,
So I was doing all the things, I was running 90 miles a week, 2 speed sessions. I was doing back-to-back runs. I was doing doubles. I mean, I was training like it was my job.
mhm,
And it got to a point where I was sort of stalling, and I'm like, and mentally I definitely was starting to get a little fried. I'm like, what am I doing? I am working so hard. Running is like you get what you put out, you get out of it what you put into it. So I'm just like more, more, more. I'm classic type A runner. And at some point I was like, okay, I have to do less. And so I cut down my miles to about 60 or 70 a week, which is still high,
mhm,
but and then I cut that second speed day. And I'd still did track Tuesday, but I cut out most of my tempos. Maybe I did a tempo every other week, but for me, that's what really pushed me farther, was realizing that I was overdoing it. I mean, thankfully I never got injured, or but I was at that brink of overtraining, and it took actually stepping back and chilling out
mhm,
because I'm kind of intense when I want something. So I just was like, okay, what I tell my athletes is goals are like a bar of soap. The tighter you hold on to them, the easier they slip away. And I was gripping that
yeah.
3 hours so tight that I was never going to get it. And when I held it loosely, it all clicked.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that makes a lot of sense because I feel like you're just like, "Well, I have to add something else because I wasn't enough, so something more needs to be added."
Right.
And similarly for me, I don't think that I quite put it so succinctly as, like, I need to take stuff away, but I was like, "I gotta stop getting complicated." Like, there's a handful of things that my body tends to respond to. Let's double down on those. Let's just keep doing those and do those well. And then I don't have to worry, like and then, like, let the rest figure itself out, and that's
Hmm.
kind of like the what happened to me and what was the kind of, like, the difference in the last couple of builds was, like, I know what's gonna work. I just gotta, like, keep doing it until I get it kinda thing.
Exactly, exactly. I think it's similar for me. Like I mean, fairly high mileage did work for me, but
Mhm,
that's only because I ran really slow on my slow days. I ran, 9:30 to 10:30 miles per hour so 2 to 3 minutes slower than marathon pace. I was, embrace the jog, really slow, lots of miles was the vast majority of my training. And yeah, of course I did speed work for sure, but the endurance piece of it was it's what I'm good at.
mhm, yeah, and so but you're doing all this training also in Asheville though, right? And so it's, like,
Yes.
such a hilly place that I don't think most people are aware that it's a very, like, difficult place to run. I've run there once, like, over a weekend, and I was like, "Ah, no one prepared me for this."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're mountains. They're not super high mountains, 2,200 feet, but so you still get a little altitude for sure. And we have a great trail system along the river. So you can run about 10 miles along the river. So, you're running back and forth and back and forth to
Mhm,
get,
yeah.
when I was training for Chicago, I just
Mhm,
stayed on the river over and over and over again. But I think that also built a lot of strength because my house is on a ridge. And so every run
yeah,
my cool down is uphill, every
yeah,
single one, unless I'm doing the little 2 mile of my ridge, which
mhm,
I do a lot now. But, so if I was going for any run, it always ended uphill. So it built some strong legs.
awesome, and so, like, when you said you're a coach and you've been coaching people
Hmm.
for a little while now, do you
Hmm.
find yourself at like, do you feel like that's what I do now, I just take stuff away from people, like, stop people from, like, getting in their own way?
Well, I mean, I coach people of all abilities. So
Mhm.
people from run walk to one of my proudest moments is I coached the Masters champion, so M50 champion in the marathon. He just won that last year. So anyway, so I coach a really wide variety of people. So some people you really have to just hold back. You have to pull them
Mm,
back and pull them back and pull them back, and other people need a little nudge. So
okay.
it really just kind of depends on where you are, but for me personally, I'm motivation's never been my problem, like I always am going for it. So people who aren't quite as motivated, I don't always relate to as much.
Okay.
But the people who are totally motivated to run, those are my people.
Very cool. Um, we got Adam in the chat. He's saying, like, you mentioned your house is on a ridge, so your cool down is uphill, but your warm up is downhill.
That's true.
To me, that sounds nice. I think I'd like to have it that I would prefer to have it that way.
Yeah, the warm up definitely is downhill. So, you have to force yourself to keep it slow on the downhills for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, you can't get away from them.
Nice. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the podcast because, like,
Mhm.
I'm like, when I hear your voice, I'm like, sometimes I'm like, wait, am I listening to an ad? Because your voice is like very crisp whenever it comes through, and I'm like, it sounds very professional. Like this sounds like someone that's had like voice training. Have you ever had any of that kind of training, or this is just you just start talking and it sounds like a radio ad?
Oh, well, thank you. No, I mean, I guess I did take voice lessons as a
Okay.
kid, but not to speaking. I mean, I was on the debate team and did stuff like that,
Okay.
but nothing professional in podcasting. But before my own podcast, I was the host of the Run to the Top podcast for 2.5 years. And then they had a smaller podcast before that. So I've been podcasting for, 5 or 6 years at this point, and now the Planted Runner is my own baby, and I do that full time now. So that just came out in August, and yeah, this is my real voice.
Yeah, I listened recently heard the podcast that you did with Lauren Fleshman.
Mm,
That was a
yeah.
really good one, and it was, I sometimes I find, like, your voice very distracting because 'cause I'm like, "This voice just sounds so like, it sounds so, like, it sounds like a radio announcer," you know what I mean? Not like in a, like a,
Hmm.
"Hey, you're turning into 93 points," not like that, but I'm just like, it just sounds so professional, so I'm like, "She must have had some sort of training because it just sounds great."
Well, I mean, to be fair, I do practice, and like the
Okay.
style of my show is
Mm,
very professional.
mm,
Like I don't just wing it. I mean,
okay.
I wing it when I'm interviewing. Like we have
Mhm,
normal conversations like we're having now, but I do a lot of solo shows where I
mhm.
give coaching advice, and I don't like it when I say the ums and ahs and mess
Sure.
up the technical. When I'm listening, I want to hear something polished, and that is my style. I make what I like to listen to,
Mm,
and I really enjoy like somebody who takes the time to really prepare what they're going to say instead of just winging it. So when I do interviews like this, it's totally fun because I can just, be goofy or just,
mhm,
laugh and be myself. Whereas normally, I do really want to convey, what my message in a certain way. It's kind of like, in high school, you learned the 5 paragraph essay, like the start, the middle, and the end. Like that's always in my mind when I'm scripting a podcast. I really want to take the runner who's listening on a journey, and I want them to be a better runner at the end of that episode. So I do take a lot of time to make it sound that way.
awesome. I mean, it shows, it definitely shows, and related to that, somewhat related to that, Oki has a question for, I think, both of us. What kind of microphones are you using? I'm using a Shure. I didn't remember what it was, but Calvin remembered. He's like, Kafu's using a Shure MB7, and I think that sounds right. But what
Yeah.
you know what
Um,
you're using?
yeah, mine is Audio Technica. So
Mhm.
AT, I don't know, 2005, something like
Okay.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are you really do you really get into the tech, or you're like, I bought a microphone a while ago and it works?
Well, thankfully, I have help with
Okay.
audio, so I don't edit my podcast. I actually
Mhm.
do a podcast for my athletes, a private podcast that I edit myself, but the real podcast is edited for me, and so, shout out to Jeremy if you're listening. So he, recommends things to me. So he
Oh,
is
okay,
like,
nice.
"You need this one, you need to get this kind or that kind." So I do get into a little bit, but once I've got something, I want it to work forever. Like I don't go and keep researching. I'm just like, okay, this sounds good. Let's go with it.
Yes, yeah, there's sometimes where I'm definitely like that with the microphones. I'm like, I don't know. I'll buy one that works, and once it works, I'll just buy another one. So that way, when this one breaks, I'll have another one if it breaks,
Hmm.
you know. But then there's other things where I'm constantly like, all right, this is great. Now what's the next thing that I might want to get in a little while from now? But so it kind of just I don't know. I don't know exactly when it depends, but it depends
Yeah. I
for
mean,
me on
I've
that
got a
kind of thing.
few. So, what I have learned though is that it's not actually so much your microphone. I mean, a good microphone helps, but
Mhm.
it's where your voice is like I sound
Yeah,
different like this and I sound different like that. It's
yeah.
positioning and it's learning all of that kind of stuff like how you hold like I sound different when I do this and and it's like your background. So there's so much more to it than just your microphone, especially for podcasting cuz we're in people's ears. They listen
Yeah.
to us very close. It's like we're whispering in their ears. So it's got to really sound good.
All right. Very cool. And then you mentioned like social media, and I know you have like
Hmm.
your Planted Runner Instagram feed, but
Hmm.
like I'm always curious, like when because I would consider you like I don't want to put you in a box, but I would kind of consider you like kind of podcaster first. Like I'm more like YouTube first, and like I'm
Hmm.
also on Instagram, and we have these live streams and stuff like that. So I'm in other spaces too. But, like, I'm always curious, like, what is your relationship kind of as a podcaster with, like, social media at large? How would you describe it?
So, yeah, I would love to say that I'm a podcaster first because
Mm,
that is definitely where my heart is. But I spend a lot of time on Instagram too.
okay.
So, Instagram, I started last year with 3,000 followers, and now I have 42,000 followers. So,
Nice.
a big increase in 1 year, and I'm hoping obviously to keep growing and it's not necessarily so much for that number that the vanity metrics. I want to have a community to talk to and to
Mhm.
help and to motivate and share my knowledge with. So getting bigger on Instagram is a priority for me. And we've just started putting the podcast on YouTube. So that is
Mhm.
a whole different beast. I'm a baby on YouTube. So just trying to learn how to do that. But I love the concept of YouTube being it's such a big platform and it's easier for people to discover you. If you have a podcast and that's it, it's really hard to get to bigger audiences because podcasting is limited as far as discoverability. So Instagram and hopefully eventually YouTube are ways that I can branch out. So yeah, I'm on Instagram quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm on there a lot for researches. You know what I'll tell my family? I'm like, "Well, I gotta know what people are running in. I gotta know what people are
Yeah.
doing," that kind of thing. But then I'll just find myself going down like a rabbit hole, and because I like to make reels, and so like I try to find other genres to draw inspiration from, and so it's like I will go down just kind of like these weird subgenres of Instagram, and I'm like, after an hour, I'm like, that was a long trip. I need to take a
Yeah.
break.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm on Instagram and I obviously get a lot of running content, but I
Mhm.
also like plants, I got all
Right.
these
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
like I'm like plants and like furniture flips, even though I don't flip furniture. I
Okay,
just
yeah,
I
yeah.
watch before and afters, so I don't know what Instagram thinks of me, because it's not all running. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's running in plants, so maybe it's got me right. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like it either is very confused as to who you are or knows you better than you know
Ex-
you. It's one of the
exactly.
2.
Exactly.
All right, we got a question from Jody that says, "Your podcast has been so successful. Have you ever thought of moving into YouTube? Very low numbers of female running YouTubers." So Jody doesn't know that you have just started. Can you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that? Because I've had a hard time with like, I don't know if podcasts really work on YouTube because like it's very different than like the 8-minute videos that I make, So I'm just like, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
So, again, I just started like last fall. So,
Mm,
the first step certainly is putting the podcast on YouTube. Um, but again, I don't think that that's everything either. I do have somebody help me make it more interesting and do the editing and add some B-roll so it's a little spicier. And, YouTube says that they're going to be supporting podcasting a little bit more. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that there is a huge opportunity. And so I actually polled my audience just last week and I'm like, what do you guys want me to make? What do you want? Do you want more
mhm.
marathon information? Do you want more plant based stuff? Do you want more of this, that? And they honestly want more strength for runners stuff, in which I'm actually making. So I'm glad that that was already validated. So that's kind of the goal, is to start some of that, create a package of videos, release them every once in a while, to because there is not a whole lot of strength for runners stuff out there. There's a few, but there's not anything that's like really dedicated to that. And so I preach it all the time. I do it myself. It's might as well just make it. I
Right.
think that will do really well.
Um, do you think that because I see like strength for runners being very popular both on Instagram and on YouTube too. Do you think it's popular because here's why I think it's popular. I think it's popular because runners love to procrastinate doing their strength work or just to not do their strength work. But if you watch a couple of videos and you can be like, well, mentally, I'll just file that away for later and I'll do it before my next workout. That like qualifies as like kind of a nice way of not doing it? That's my theory.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I think runners have good intentions, of course, to strength train, but I think they really just want to do like 10 minutes after their cool down, or they want to do 15 minutes here. They don't want to
Mhm.
spend an hour in a gym. They want, I mean, half an hour tops is pretty much what you'll get out of a
Mm,
runner. So if they have a follow along video, they have their phone, they can just set
mhm.
the phone down. They don't have to think because their brains are fried at the end of the run. They don't want to have to decide which workout to do or which exercises to do. So I think a follow along thing could be really helpful. And I think they're popular because people watch them over and over again.
Yeah,
So, the same people are like, oh, I love that, I don't know, core video. And so they'll watch it 10 times, which you're not going to do to a podcast video.
that's true. That's true. Um, I could use a follow along. I've had like do strength work as like a New Year's running resolution every year for like the last 4 years in a row.
Yeah.
Although this year or at the end of last year, I finally bought a weight. I bought one
Just one.
kettlebell. So I feel like, that's progress. That's a lot
Yeah.
of progress for me.
Do you actually lift it up and put it back down, or
Sometimes it's mostly sits over there by the bike trainer, but, I have it, and, like, I feel like that's a step. I mean, I
Yeah.
do, like, I do body weight mobility work, and that's been, like, really important for me. I developed, like, a runner's knee issue a couple of years ago, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Alright, I have really terrible balance, I gotta figure something out," and so I've been
Yeah.
doing that regularly, and I finally got that to be a routine, and that took a long time to kind of figure out, which is so annoying. I'm like, "I could have run, like, an extra mile today if I didn't do this," It's always like,
Yes.
it always feels like a zero-sum trade-off, but eventually that has become a habit, and I'm like, "Alright, well, it's in the house now." The step
Mhm.
1,
There you
hopefully
go.
it won't take another 4 years to get to, like, step 2, but, I'm trying, but I think a follow-along video, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, I don't know. So I think there's a lot of opportunities on
Mhm,
YouTube, and I'm doing a lot already, so I'm trying to not spread myself too thin,
mhm,
but I think the first step, getting the podcast on there, making the shorts, doing all of that, and then actually creating a series that people are waiting for, that, oh,
mhm.
that one was cool, I'll do another one. That's, one of those, a series that people can follow along the journey, I think, can be really compelling if it's done right. So we'll see.
All right, looking forward to it. All right, let's move on to kind of like the next topic that kind of I had set out for today, and let's talk about this book that you put out, The Planted Runner.
Hey,
You know, when you
you
were
have
gonna,
it.
yeah, well, you know what? I think it was your publisher. Someone emailed me and was like, "Would you like a PDF?" And I was like, "Sure, you can send one," but I also wanted to have a physical copy, so I made sure I ordered one. Very excited about it. Tell us about the book. Like, what can you give us like a brief synopsis? Who's it for? What's it about?
Yeah. So the Planted Runner is running your best on plant based nutrition. So it is a running book for plant based runners, not the other way around. If you're not a runner, this probably isn't the one for you. And it's
No.
basically how to fuel your running, how to get started with running, how to be an endurance runner that's well fueled, that doesn't eat, meat or dairy. And the one thing I always want to say is that I'm not like some plant based evangelist. I don't, you do you. This works for me. And so I talk about basic nutrition. I am a sports nutrition specialist, but I am not a registered dietitian. So if you need like absolute perfect macro counts or meal plans, you should go to an RD for that. But this lays out the basics of how you can fuel yourself well and train really well to become the best runner that you want to be. So it's a book that you don't necessarily have to read page 1 to page 250. You can bounce around and you can see what chapters work for you. So it's training, recovery, weights, stretching, foam rolling, all that good stuff. It's basically a collection of everything that I've been preaching and writing for years about, all in one book.
Nice, nice. You know, and people in the chat, they think I'm not like reading the chat today, but I'm keeping an eye on it. And Stevie76 is teasing me because he knows that I fall asleep very easily with written books. He says I read the first page and then I fall asleep, which is not wrong, but it's not exactly true. I've gotten past page 1 of the book. I'm
Good.
a huge audiobook fan, and so, like, I'll
Yes.
consume audiobooks, like, 'cause I'm out there running, like, 10 hours, 11 hours a week, so I got plenty of time to read, air
Mhm.
quotes. But, like, physical books are challenging for me because I usually only read them in bed, and then I'm already, like, I'm laying down end of the day, and then
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
fall
I
asleep.
guess I should record it for an audiobook. It never even crossed my mind and my publisher
Mhm.
didn't ask
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
and now people are like, "Oh, you have the voice. Why
yeah.
don't you make it an audiobook?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't think about that. I don't know how that how I do that, but I probably could."
Yeah, well, here's the thing, like, I've only bought, like, 2 books. I went to law school, and that ruined, like, reading for me,
Ah.
and so, since then, I think I've bought 2 books since graduating from law school in 2008. I bought a couple of cookbooks, that's about that I don't think that really counts, though, and the other one is from my friend Ryan Van Duzer, who's a YouTuber, bicycle adventures, and I was like, "Ryan, I'm very excited to support you on your book, but can you please make an audiobook version because I won't read it." And he's like, "Well, maybe I'll sit down in front of a camera one day and just read it from front to end." I was like, "Okay, I guess I'll just buy the book and I'll try to read it." But I have the same problem where I read it a little bit and then I fall asleep. So
Mhm.
I'm trying, but well, don't tell Ryan, but I've gotten further in your book than I've gotten in Ryan's book so far.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment, so thank you.
Calvin also teasing me saying Kofuzi has yet to cross the finish line of a book without sleeping. Yeah, they love to give me a little bit of a hard time.
That's great. It's
But
they all seem to know each other. Look at everybody just chatting with each other back and forth like they're old friends. It's
y
great.
yeah, it's a good group in here. Here's one thing that I'll share from the book that I feel like I think that you won't get this. Here's where I'm like, here's where you gotta buy the paper book copy. One thing that I love is in the beginning, you've got the blurbs that people are doing blurbers for you.
Yeah.
And so like we got Matt Fitzgerald, Megan and David Roche to do one in here. And I thought I saw it's not in the printed version, but I thought I saw was it Alex Hutchinson did one for you too?
Yes.
That's pretty
Yes,
cool.
his review was, too late for publishing, but
Okay.
it's on Amazon. Yep.
Yeah, very cool. And then
Mhm.
I was like, I'm looking through, I'm like, who else do I know that's in here? And then on the second page of them, there's one by Aaron Azar. So Mrs. Space
Yes.
Cadet did one too. And I was like, well, that's awesome.
Yes, Miss
Here,
Space Cadet.
here's my question. So it says here, so she writes her blurb talking about how great the book is, and then it says Aaron Azar, comma, humorist, running advocate, and social media superstar.
Yeah.
Did you write that or did she write that? Like who picked that
I
title?
can't remember if I wrote that. My editor might have put that in. Maybe I don't think I used the word humorist. I might have said social media superstar because she
Yeah.
is. She
Yeah,
really
she
is.
is. Because I'm just like, I have a hard time figuring out, like, people are like, "Give me a bio," or whatever, and I'm like, "I don't know, I run a lot." Like, I don't know what to say.
You're too modest.
And so yeah, oh, thank you, but I always tell people, like, "I don't know, you put something in." I'm like, "YouTuber, influencer?" Like, I don't know. People are like, "You really want me to write influencer?" I'm like, "Ah, it's a good shorthand."
Yeah, I recorded the intro for you coming on my show next week, and I think
Mhm.
I called you an accidental influencer.
I like that.
Accidental running
There we go.
influencer.
Yeah. Oh, that's so
Just
funny.
happened, you ran into it. Ha ha.
Ye Oh, that's so funny. But how so the book just came out, like, earlier this
Yeah,
year?
it just came out the beginning of January, but
Mhm,
it's been like years in the making. I
mhm.
actually signed my book contract at the end of 2020. And
Okay.
so it's just like I've almost forgotten about it. And it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I wrote about there was just delays, with the pandemic and
Mhm.
shipping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my gosh, when is this book ever gonna come out? I need to like do other things
Yeah.
and now it's here. So it's great.
Um, do you feel like so, like, if I looked at a like, when I go back and I see videos and I think YouTube videos are created in a very different way than, like, a book is created.
Hmm.
Like, when I watch a video from, like, late 2020, I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know. I don't wanna be identified by, like, my past work. It feels
I
cringy
hear you.
sometimes." Do you feel that when? Because I feel like I would feel that, like, if I wrote a book or something where I, like, looked at something I'd created on paper, like, 2 years later. How do you feel about
There are a few little sections that maybe I feel that way,
it? Okay.
but it's kind of like I
Mm.
wrote it and then put it aside. And then when I read it, it's like it's somebody else wrote it. And I'm like, huh, this is pretty good. No, but there's a couple of them where I don't know. I talk about the 5K and whoever had the 5K record back in 2020, like records
Oh,
have
okay.
been broken. And
Mhm.
so, like, there's things like that that I wish I just left out because
Mhm.
they kind of date me,
Mhm.
and so they're like the records aren't real anymore. So there's
Mhm.
a few like, things like that. But overall my style I feel of writing is still kind of the same.
Mhm.
So most of it I'm still pretty happy with. But yeah, there was actually some things that we were going to add in there at the end that were kind of more timely that at the last minute we cut out. And I'm really glad because
Mhm.
they would have been really great if it came out in 2021, but now it's 2023 and so they didn't make so much sense. So I'm glad we did some edits. But overall, I am really proud and happy that I did it and I would never ever do it again. Writing a book is so hard and is so stressful and it's so just like and it's like staring at the blank screen kind of thing a lot because my background is writing blog posts because I've been blogging for a long time. So it's like being a sprinter and then trying to run a marathon,
Mhm.
like it's just so overwhelming. So I would not recommend writing a book if you can help it. I will
Like,
not be doing it again.
I wrote a book, would not recommend doing that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
How long did it take to get from, like, when you, like, felt like it was done to,
Mm,
like, when it was, like, really done? Because I know that there's, like, after that, you submit it, then there'll probably be some edits, some revisions, like, rework
right.
this, let's cut this, add that, like, what was that time frame like?
That was probably 6 months.
Oh,
So when
really?
I turned it in, it
Mhm,
was September 2021, and then March of the following year is when we went back and really edited and fine-tuned it and stuff like that. So, you know, if you're self-published, this whole process goes a lot faster, I've heard, but because I was working with a company, I'm kinda on their schedule a lot.
mhm,
So, it goes to the editor, but then it goes to the copy editor, and there's several layers of people that are looking at it. So a lot of it's out of my hands. But that was an amazing day in September when I was just like, here you go. Take it. I don't want to look at it ever again. And then to see it back in March when I had to I was just like, oh God, you again.
yeah.
And then I had to pick pictures and and do a few other things and move things around, that kind of thing. But I'm very thankful that I had other eyes on it because, when you're really close to your own work, you kind of don't know if it's good or bad. You're just like, I don't know. And so thankfully I had a couple of layers of people that helped sort things out, which was helpful.
Nice, nice. Before I let you go, one thing I do want to circle back on is,
Mhm.
as a planted runner,
Mhm.
um, you were plant-based before you started running, right?
Yeah, but just by a few months. So
Okay.
I had, made the leap and, was just like, I'm an all or nothing kind of person. So I just was like, I'm going to go plant based. And I did.
Mhm,
And I never looked back. Most people should probably ease into it. But I was just like, I'm jumping in the deep end of the pool. But then I started running, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later. So I don't have
mhm,
this like, magic story where I say, I had a terrible time running and then I went plant-based and
mhm,
it was a miracle. I mean,
mhm,
it's no, in my story is not like that at all.
mhm,
But I did never get injured, in 9 marathons. So
mhm.
that's pretty impressive. I don't know if it was the plants or the strength training or just genetics or luck, whatever it was. But yeah, so I was plant-based first and then I really had to dial it in to be able
Mhm.
to eat enough to race marathons well.
And then with your running, did you have a history of running before then? Or you were just like, one day I'm like, I'm gonna give this thing a shot?
I had a couple of fits and starts. So
Okay.
in high school, I wanted to do this Outward Bound course, which is like an outdoor adventure course thing.
Mhm.
And my dad had done it. And he's like, well, you have to run a marathon to do or a half marathon to do that. And so I trained all summer. I had my Walkman with this Top Gun soundtrack. And, I went out. I went out and trained.
Yeah.
And, I didn't have a training plan. I just went out
Yeah.
and ran. I didn't know what I was doing. And when I got there, I did the half marathon and I ended up beating all the boys. So I'm like,
Mhm.
maybe I'm pretty good at that. Tried out for track, raced one meet, got last place, and then quit. And then,
Oh, really?
yeah, I'm just like, this isn't for me, you know? And then in my 20s, I had a breakup and did a half marathon, but then
Mhm.
got back together with the guy and ended up marrying him. Long story.
Okay.
And I quit running after that. So it wasn't until my high school reunion was coming and I was like, I need to get in shape. I should go for a run. I know
Mhm,
that running's the best way to get in shape. It's simple. I can just do it. And I hated it. Oh my God, I hated it.
mm,
Hated running for like a year. And then the reunion came and went, and I was like in great shape. And I'm like, well, I got to run that half marathon again. And I ran the same half marathon that I did in my 20s and, beat my time by, I don't know, 6 minutes or something.
mhm,
And I'm like, maybe I should, I don't know, maybe I should run the Boston Marathon. I didn't know
mhm.
that you needed to run a fast time to run the Boston Marathon. I just thought you could just do that. No. But so I started training for marathons. Didn't make it at my first one because I chose Asheville as my first marathon. So it was hilly and cold and rainy. But I did BQ at my second marathon. And then I was absolutely hooked.
Nice. Where was the second marathon at?
The
Do you
second
remember?
one was one of those Revel ones. So it was
Okay.
big
Yeah, yeah.
cottonwood. So it was just like
Okay.
barreling down a mountain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love a good downhill race. I ran the light at the end of the tunnel marathon. It's not a rebel
Oh,
race,
yeah.
but it's one in, like, outside of Seattle that a lot of people
Yeah.
go to. It's like 2,000 feet of downhill, but it's
Yeah.
super gradual, so it's just, like, all usable. For me, like, the only kind of downhill I don't like is the kind that you have to, like, slow yourself down because it's too steep, and I'm
Hmm.
like, "This is such a waste of good downhill." Could
Yeah.
we could have leveled this out, and I could have had more downhill for a longer time.
Yeah, I think Big Cottonwood is something like 4,000 feet of
Mhm,
loss, so it's a lot,
mhm.
but then there's, like, this flat part at the end, and after all that downhill, it's like it's a brick wall,
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like, "Oh my god, I can't believe it." It's like it feels terrible, but
Mhm.
I squeaked by on that one, and
Okay.
then I didn't choose such hard downhill races.
Mhm.
I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah, Go Running with Oliver said Kofuzi for his first BQ at a downhill. Yeah, that was me, that light at the end of the tunnel. But I got I was like, "Oh, I think if I have 2,000 feet of downhill, I might be able to squeak under." I needed 310 at the time, and I got a
Mhm.
lot I surprised myself. I was able to get a little bit more than that underneath, so I was like, "Okay." So, I feel okay about this. Yeah.
Yeah. And, those revel races, not everybody is good at them or not everybody trains
Mhm.
well for them. A
Yeah.
lot of people completely blow up. I was talking to somebody at the end who was like a really, really strong runner, and he just had a terrible time with it, just trashed his quads. And he's like, this is harder than, they sell it to be,
Sure.
the really
Yeah.
steep ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it could backfire really
Hmm.
easily for some people. Martha says that for her downhill for her first BQ was same as Co. I think she went to the light at the end of the tunnel the same race. It was for her first marathon and she got a BQ. But to prove it wasn't cheating, I keep BQing in Boston. So since she's gone back,
Oh,
and she's done,
good.
I feel like that's like the double stamp. Like if you
Yeah.
can go to and get your BQ on that challenging course, I feel like that's like extra hard.
Yeah, I mean, as far as downhill racing, and not being cheating or whatever, it's still 26.2 miles. You still got to run it all. I think, if you can do that and meet the time, you're awesome. Like I don't see it as cheating at all. But I hear you. It's fun to get it on tougher courses too.
Yeah, for sure. Before I let you go, we got a question from Adam
Mhm.
for you. How do you deal with like anemia or like getting enough iron?
Yeah, well, so runners are at risk for anemia. Runners, people who menstruate,
Mhm.
and people who are plant based are at a higher risk of anemia. I actually had anemia before I started running, before I was plant based, when I was pregnant with my second child. So it is something that is kind of in my history anyway. But I learned to deal with it. So I did take iron pills with folic acid and vitamin C for a while to get back on track. But there are still lots of ways to get iron in a plant based diet. You just have to pay attention to it. I think even if you're not plant based, I think you should be paying attention to your diet. Plenty of omnivore runners deal with low iron, low ferritin. It's not just vegan and vegetarian runners,
Mhm.
but yes, it is less prevalent in plant based foods. So you just have to have it more on your radar. And there's nothing wrong with supplementing if you've been tested as having low iron or low ferritin or anemia, because iron is toxic at for certain people and at higher levels. So you definitely don't just want to preventatively supplement. You need to get a blood test.
Yeah, because I don't know if you remember, like, was it Camille Herron said she had actually had too much iron and it was really affecting her performance, and then she stopped
Oh,
taking.
I didn't hear that. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, like,
that's interesting.
I don't know if she was working with, like, Inside Tracker, like, as a
Mhm.
sponsor situation or what, but she was like, "At one point, I realized I was getting too much iron," or she wasn't releasing enough of it,
Yeah,
from the system in, like, a normal way. I don't know if her body processes it different, but she was like,
probably.
"It was as bad for me as if I had been, like, low in iron," and I was like, "Oh, I didn't
Mhm.
really do that." So now I
Mhm.
feel like, "Oh, I guess I shouldn't just pop, like, an iron supplement or anything like that."
No,
Yeah.
definitely not. I mean, there are ways I mean, I see B12 is coming up in the
Mhm.
chat.
Mhm.
B12 is actually super safe to take even if you don't
Okay.
have a low,
Mhm.
B12 level. Again, omnivores are low in B12 too. So I recommend that anybody who is vegan or vegetarian, they should supplement with B12. And it's not that B12 comes from bacteria in the soil. It's not that it's from animals, it just gets concentrated in animal meat. And because industrial farming has depleted our soil of the bacteria that makes B12, we don't have it as much in our meat and we don't have it as much in our plants. So, it's super safe. It's super cheap. If you take too much, you just pee it out. It's not like toxic like iron is. So it's probably a good idea for most people to check their B12 or just go ahead and take it.
Alright, very cool. Alright, I don't wanna take too much more of your time. Thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with us on our happy hour Thursdays.
Of course.
Can you let everybody know where to find you for, especially for people who are listening and might not have, all the links down below in the description?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the Planted Runner everywhere. So the Planted Runner podcast, the Planted Runner on Instagram and on YouTube. And I also have a free fueling guide if anybody is interested on what to eat before, during, and after your run. And you can get that at theplantedrunner.com/join, JOIN.
All right. Thanks so much. Martha says, thanks, Planted Runner. And I let Martha speak for all of us. She's one of the regulars here. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Tomorrow, we'll do another live stream, same time as today, 1 p.m. Central Time. Thanks, Claire. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Until I see you guys again, be safe out there, everybody. Bye.